For more than 3 decades, my wife and I built careers in public education. We loved what we did, but we knew we wanted something different for the next chapter of our lives. So we made one of the biggest decisions we'd ever make. We retired decades earlier than most people thought possible. How did two ordinary public school educators retire decades early without winning the lottery or becoming millionaires? That's exactly what we're going to answer in this video. Welcome to Unretired in Japan, where we are documenting what life after early retirement really looks like. Let's go. When people hear that we retired decades earlier than most, they usually assume we hated our jobs. The truth is, we didn't. We spent more than 30 years working in public education, and those careers gave us purpose, lifelong friendships, and the chance to make a difference every single day. Walking away wasn't easy. What changed wasn't our love for the work. It was how we started thinking about time. At some point, we realized that money could always be earned, invested, and saved. Time doesn't work that way. Every birthday reminded us that the healthiest years of our lives weren't something we could put off until 65 or 70. We didn't want to spend those years saying, someday we'll travel, or someday we'll live overseas. We wanted our someday to begin today, while we still had the energy to enjoy it. Retirement wasn't the finish line. It wasn't about sitting at home or doing nothing. For us, retirement meant creating the freedom to choose how we wanted to spend each day. So how are we going to handle this financially? We realized that our retirement wasn't one long stretch of time. It was actually 3 different phases, and each one needed to be funded differently. The first phase is what we call the bridge. This was the period between leaving our jobs and reaching the age when we could begin accessing our retirement accounts. For us, that meant building a plan that would carry us from age 52 to 60 without relying on a paycheck. The second phase would begin when our retirement accounts became available. Because we had built that first bridge, we could leave those investments untouched for several more years, giving them additional time to grow before we needed them. The third phase was Social Security. We made the personal decision to delay claiming our benefits because we wanted to maximize our monthly income later in retirement. There are good arguments for claiming earlier or later, and we'll dive into that decision in future videos. For us, waiting made the most sense. Once we understood these 3 phases, everything became much clearer. Instead of trying to fund an entire retirement all at once, we only needed to solve one phase at a time. So how did we build that first bridge? It came down to 2 things: years of consistent savings and the equity we had built in our home. Selling our house gave us the cash we needed to help fund those early retirement years while allowing our retirement investments to continue growing in the background. Our goal wasn't to become wealthy. Our goal was to create enough financial freedom to live the life we wanted. We planned to live simply, travel slowly, and keep our expenses low enough that our bridge could comfortably carry us to the next phase of retirement. Your bridge may look completely different. Maybe you have a pension. Maybe you'll retire at a different age. Maybe you'll never sell your home, and that's okay. The important lesson isn't to copy our plan. It's to look at your own assets, your own debts, and your own timeline, then ask a simple question. Can I build a bridge from the day I stop working to the day my long-term retirement income begins? That question changed everything for us. Once we had a financial plan, we realized something important. Retiring early wasn't just about changing where our money came from. It was about changing how we wanted to live. For us, that meant letting go of a life we'd spent decades building. We sold our car, then we sold our truck. We sold our 4-bedroom home in Orlando, Florida, and began going through everything we owned. Like a lot of Walt Disney fans, we'd collected quite a bit over the years. We'd been fortunate enough to visit every Disney park in the world, and along the way we'd filled our home with souvenirs and memories. My wife spent months photographing, listing, packing, and shipping hundreds of those items to people who would enjoy them as much as we had. Little by little, our house became emptier. What surprised us was that every box leaving the house felt less like a loss and more like progress. We weren't getting rid of our memories, we were simply realizing they didn't have to live on a shelf. Our goal became surprisingly simple. Everything we owned needed to fit into two full-size suitcases, two carry-on bags, two backpacks, and of course, everything our Shih Tzu Meili needed for her new adventure. That was it. We traded an entire four-bedroom house full of possessions for the freedom to pick up our lives and begin a completely new chapter. That doesn't mean everyone needs to sell everything they own. This was simply the choice that made the most sense for us. The lesson isn't to copy our lifestyle. It's to ask yourself what you're willing to trade for the life you want. For us, the answer was easy. We chose experiences over possessions, freedom over square footage, and memories still waiting to be made over things we already owned. But there was one more question we had to answer before we could leave. What about our family and friends? One thing we don't hear discussed very often is how the people in your life fit into an early retirement plan. Money's important, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. The relationships you have with family and friends can be just as important when you're deciding whether it's the right time to retire. For us, one of the biggest considerations was my wife's mother. She had lived with us for the last 8 years, and before we could begin this next chapter of our lives, we needed to make sure she was ready for hers. Together, we made the decision to help her transition into an independent living community. It wasn't something we decided overnight. We spent months planning, visiting communities, asking questions, and making sure she would be safe, comfortable, and happy. We also realized that our situation gave us flexibility that many people don't have. We don't have children or grandchildren keeping us geographically rooted. That made the decision to move overseas much easier than it might be for someone else. Then there were our friends. When you've lived somewhere for decades, your friendships become part of your daily life. The good news is that today's technology makes staying connected easier than ever. Video calls, text messages, social media, and occasional trips back home help us maintain those friendships, even from the other side of the world. It isn't exactly the same, but we found that the real friendships don't disappear simply because you change your address. Every retirement plan is personal because every life is personal. Maybe you're caring for aging parents. Maybe your grandchildren are the center of your world. Maybe you have close friends that you can't imagine living without. Or maybe, like us, you're in the season of life where you have the flexibility to explore something new. There isn't one right answer. The goal isn't to build our retirement, it's to build yours. Before you make one of the biggest decisions of your life, take time to think about the people who matter most. Make them part of the conversation because the best retirement plan isn't just one that works financially. It needs to work emotionally too. Once we knew the people we cared about would be okay, there was one final question we had to answer. Were we physically ready for the life we wanted to live? It's a question we don't hear asked enough. Are you healthy enough to enjoy the retirement you're planning? For us, that question became incredibly important. Travel sounds glamorous, but the reality is very different. It means carrying luggage through airports, climbing subway stairs, walking several miles a day, navigating unfamiliar cities, and adapting to new environments. It's exciting, but it can also be physically demanding. We didn't want to wait until someday. We wanted to retire while we were still healthy enough to enjoy everything we'd been dreaming about for years. That's one of the reasons staying active has become part of our retirement plan. We walk every day, not because we have to, but because we want to continue exploring new places for as long as we can. Health also means planning for the unexpected. Healthcare was a major part of our retirement planning, and we'll dedicate an entire video to how we approached health insurance, medical care, and living overseas with confidence. For now, the important takeaway is this. Don't just ask whether you can afford to retire. Ask whether you're physically ready to enjoy the life that you've been working toward. Once we answered that question, we really only had one thing left. Where should we begin our new life? Once we'd answered the financial questions, the family questions, and the health questions, we had one decision to make. Where did we actually want to live? For us, the answer wasn't simply Japan. It was something called geographic arbitrage. It's just a fancy way of saying we chose to live somewhere our retirement dollars could go further without sacrificing the quality of our lives. We wanted a place where we could live comfortably, enjoy excellent public transportation, feel safe walking almost everywhere, and experience a culture that encouraged us to stay active and curious. Japan checked every one of those boxes. That doesn't mean it's the right answer for everyone. It also doesn't mean we're going to stay in Japan forever. Your dream retirement might be Portugal, Mexico, Costa Rica, Italy, or staying exactly where you are today. The destination isn't the lesson. In future videos, we'll discuss other great countries to go after early retirement. But the lesson here is finding a place that supports the lifestyle you want while allowing your retirement savings to last as long as possible. Japan simply became the first chapter of our story. It won't be the last. Our plan is to continue exploring the world one country at a time, and we'll be bringing you along for the journey, which brings us to the biggest takeaway from everything we've shared today. If you've watched the video this far, you've probably noticed something. There wasn't one secret that allowed us to retire decades early. There wasn't one investment. There wasn't one lucky break. There wasn't a magical moment where everything suddenly fell into place. Instead, there were hundreds of intentional decisions. Some were financial, some were emotional, some involved our family, some involved our health, and some simply required us to rethink what kind of life we wanted to live. Every one of those decisions became another step toward the life we're living today. Over the next several videos, we're going to dive much deeper into each part of this journey. We'll show you exactly how we built our financial bridge, how we budget for life, how we chose Japan, how we're handling healthcare, and the lessons we've learned along the way. If retiring early is something you've been thinking about, we hope our story gives you ideas, encouragement, and maybe even the confidence to start asking some of these same questions yourself. Because retirement isn't really about stopping work. It's about creating the freedom to live life on your own terms. And if that sounds like the kind of journey you'd like to follow, we'd love to have you join us. Welcome to Unretired in Japan.